Hello and welcome to the Choralosophy Podcast, a weekly podcast whose mission is multifaceted. Each week when you tune in, you will find episodes that question best practices, challenge music education dogma, facilitate conversations about touchy topics, demonstrate pedagogies, and conversations where colleagues learn from each other. This is episode 254, Finding Passion in Every Note with Elena Sharkova. Elena is an artistic leader and pioneer in American choral music, but her roots are Russian. This shared identity has its complexities now, of course. You won't want to miss her thoughts later in the episode on this. This week I had the pleasure of speaking with Elena, who shares her extensive journey in choral music, from her early education in Russia to her current role as the artistic director of Cantabile Youth Singers. She discusses the importance of youth choral education, the challenges of working with different types of choirs, from professional to adult to children, and her innovative approach to incorporating movement into choral rehearsals. I've got a video posted as an example of her choir singing at ACDA in 2019 posted in the show notes. Be sure to find that. Elena also addresses the complexities of programming music in a politically sensitive climate, emphasizing the need for inclusivity and understanding in the arts. Her passion for music and education shines through as she offers valuable insights for choir directors. So be sure to tune in and listen all the way to the end. And then, of course, if your thoughts have been stimulated or your perceptions challenged, go over to the Choralosophers Facebook group and start a conversation there about the episode. There's going to be a lot of conversation starters, I think, for those of you who are brave enough to weigh in. Or, of course, you can find more content related to the show and also written form content on the Substack at choralosophy.substack.com. Choir directors, music educators, show planners, you pour your heart into your music. Shouldn't your events get the same attention? That's where Ludus comes in. Sell tickets, promote your concerts, and fundraise with ease. Selling merchandise and concessions? Ludus Retail makes in-person sales effortless. Running choir camps or workshops? They have a classes feature that keeps registration simple, and when you need help, the live support team is ready to pop up with real answers from real people. The best part? It's completely free for organizations. Thousands of music programs already trust Ludus because great music deserves more than just a ticketing system. If you haven't already, I really think it's time for you to ditch the bulky sight reading books, the paper, all of the things that are already in the kids' folders in your classroom because it's not customizable to what they need in the moment. Sight Reading Factory allows this and so much more. And then the work we do in the classroom can be customized to what they need in the music and the repertoire they're learning, and it can be customized to their current learning level as a group. So use the Choralosophy checkout code, Choralosophy. When you check out, it'll give you a 10% discount every time you get a membership for yourself and for all of your students, which is really, really important so they can do this at home. I'm not sure how much, if anything, out there has not gone up in price since 2020, but I know one thing that hasn't, and that is the membership to the Patreon and to the Substack to support this show. The people who are signed up over there as paid subscribers, as my thank you to them, they can get things like t-shirts from the Choralosophy.com shop. They can also get access to my Google folder of teaching materials that I've talked about on the show for over the years. And of course, they just want to help make sure that this show can continue. And one of those benefits is a shout out on the show. The producers and inner circle from Patreon are Brian Long, Chandler Smith, Venture Studios, Jonah Clicksbull, Danelle Eckert, David Kowalczyk, Jared Hendricks, Kyle Peterson, Max Jackson, Michael Herron, Nathan Hines, and Steve and Kathy Kakachik. All right, everyone. I am here with Elena Sharkova, who is someone that I've been a huge fan of my whole choir life. So I'm geeking out just a little bit. Elena, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
This is going to be fun. I, of course, like I said, have been an admirer of your work and have seen you do festival choirs and, of course, followed your career for quite a while. But why don't you give us the introduction of, just in case there's someone in my audience who doesn't know who you are, and share a little bit about where you come from and where you got started on this musical path that you are now on.
Oh my gosh, it's always difficult to talk about it because there's so much. But if I may just share something, that now I have lived half and half in Russia and in the United States. It's the same number of years. My music education started very early, which was the way then, and still in the Soviet Union. I started when I was 6 And I never stopped until I was, 22, which was the 23, I apologize, which is when I graduated from St. Petersburg Conservatory. So then my education, of which I can talk about for a long time, because I think it's fascinating how music professionals were trained at that time, still actually are trained in Russia, and how little possibility there was for me as a female at the time, career-wise. And so my move to the States, I didn't immigrate. I came here on a student visa. Happened not long ago after I graduated, but I already had in my experience as a professional 5 years by then singing in a professional choir, which is sort of like the way it goes. You don't just graduate from the conservatory and immediately go look for a professional chorus to conduct. You become an apprentice, so to speak. You sing in one of many professional choirs and you get a lot of rep under your belt. And then if you're lucky, you become a chorus master, which in our terms would be somebody who plays for the choir, a pianist, and also a second director or sectionals and things like that. And after doing this for a few years, then there's a chance that you might become actually a principal conductor somewhere. Again, very often it's years and years and years and waiting. My chances of doing this were very slim, just because as one of the people that I once went asking, why am I not considered for a position of a conductor, he literally pointed at my breasts and said, because you have those. So this is, yeah, I know. I mean, I don't think they do this anymore, but by then, at that time, in the 90s, it was like, yeah, no big deal. You're a woman, and what else do you not understand? So now let's point at something that will make my point complete. And then this is when I decided to move to the United States, and I got a third or fourth, whatever, I cannot even remember, degree here at Western Michigan University. And from there, my career just took flight. I mean, I still can't believe it, how much I have been blessed to do and how many opportunities I have had. I would say that nobody from my class, our classes are very small, only 8 people, because it has to be perfect. 2 tenors, 2 basses, 2 altos, and 2 sopranos on every grade, every class. I mean, except for one person who became a very successful symphony conductor. Nobody else really had any opportunities like I have had.
That's incredible.
I'm truly grateful for the music education I received. I mean, all of this was free. You just have to practice and you have to be talented enough for the country to invest in you. And then I am incredibly blessed with the opportunities that this country gave me.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like in a lot of ways, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you're in the education that you received in Russia. The upside, of course, is that the country invests in you, as you just said. Yeah. The downside, though, it sounds like, is that you are then stuck with the system that they have in place for career advancement, and there aren't as many opportunities outside of that system, whereas then you came here and suddenly the sky was the limit. Does that sound like a fair recap?
Yeah. I believe so. Mm-hmm. Yeah. For instance, there was, almost zero chance of me being a university professor, conservatory professor in Russia, which position I held here for 13 years.
Right. So do you have, since your career took flight here in the United States, has that opened up opportunities for you back in Russia now that they see that you actually can do it? Or do you do much music there at all? Or how would you describe that to us?
Oh, I wish I could say yes, but unfortunately, practically nothing. I mean, at the end of the 90s, I was able to take my choirs twice to Russia. And because I knew so many people in St. Petersburg and in Moscow, we had really nice halls to perform in. And I presented only once in St. Petersburg at the conservatory. Of course, I wanted to present on American music, and it was well received. But unfortunately, they're just, especially now, you can imagine, nobody's going to take a woman with an American passport, even a Russian passport as well, to present in Russia. No.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's fascinating. And it's unfortunate, obviously, because they don't know what they're missing, I think.
because I know
Yeah.
so much, and I could have, I've told them, especially the things that I'm really passionate about is youth choral education and, movement and improvisation. Yeah, I would have loved
Right.
to share.
Tell us a little bit more about what you're doing now, because you mentioned youth, and I know that is something that you are passionate about. You've done work with professional choirs fairly recently. So what is professional life for you right now?
Well, my full-time job is as artistic director of Cantabile Youth Singers, and I have been at it now for 22 years.
Wow.
And I love it. I absolutely love it. And so this is a very large organization. We are over 200 now, and I have teachers and I have a staff and fundraising and all of that. And of course, touring and premiering, commissioning and premiering. I have also been the music director for Symphony San Jose Choral. So it's like a true symphonic choir for a professional symphony here in San Jose. And I've been with them since 1998. Oh my God. So it's a long time. I will be coming on 30 years, I suppose, right? Yeah. 30
That's
years very
incredible.
soon. And so that is a large choir. They're all volunteers, and we do what choral symphonic choirs do, the Beethoven Nines, and of course, all of those, the war horses. But also quite recently, maybe 6 years ago, I started doing concerts with chorale and the symphony, not preparing, but actually conducting. So I have, there's a series that happens every April called Serenade to Music, where we do works with maybe sometimes small orchestra, sometimes it's just a few instrumentalists. Those pieces that would not be picked up by a professional orchestra. Mm-hmm. So it's been a wonderful journey with them. And I think that this is the organization, and these are the people, and this ensemble really truly let me grow as a conductor, because it's been so consistent, and they have been really nice to take such a young conductor without any experience, really truly preparing for orchestra and letting me grow. That I'm very thankful for. And the other part that I also enjoy so much is conducting, having engagements with professional ensembles. And it's been Chanticleer and the BBC Singers and Seraphic Fire and Vocal Arts Ensemble Cincinnati, and also Houston Chamber Choir. There's this really amazing opportunities. And naturally, something also that I treasure is honor choirs, all states. And I've been so fortunate to conduct the National Youth Choir as well. So it's really, really, really fun.
How would you describe your philosophy related to, I guess maybe I could say it in this way, the adjustment of your expectations depending on all those levels that you're working with? So when you work with your kids, that whatever your youngest group is, cantabile, and then you're working with professionals or you're working with a symphony chorus, what are your modes, so to speak, and how do you engage with those different groups and keep the expectations high but also realistic? How do you approach that?
Well, actually, between my symphonic choir and my top choir, Vocalese in Cantabile, that is somewhere between 14 and 18, I don't really, it's the same expectations, sometimes higher expectations with my teenagers, because they are just so easy they don't know what is hard. If
That's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, they don't know. I mean, you give them something and they go, okay, well, she gave it to us. We better learn it because, Russian Fury might come. Oops, I shouldn't be saying that now. That joke is old now. Right. With the symphony chorus, it's not that my expectations are lower. It's just, these are people who might be set in certain ways. And even, we get new people. It's amazing how much younger my symphony chorus has become since the end of COVID. And the younger ones are easier to adjust and kind of try new things. And for some of the older ones, I mean, my age, they was like, yeah, maybe that's a little much for me. But where everything changes is really when I work with professionals. Now that is, and again, professionals where? Is it in this country? Are they a group that sings together all the time? Or are these people who are coming together and singing this particular program with this choir, but then, next weekend they're singing somewhere else. And so those are very interesting dynamics. My longest partnership, I would say, is with Chanticleer. And, it took me a little while to like learn the flow and the dynamic, and then what they are willing to do, and what, I'm going to be singing for 2 months. Don't give me something I cannot sing every night for 2 months on tour. Mm-hmm. So things like that. And, and then going to England, of course, that was completely different experience. Don't try to change anything with BBC singers or die. I was invited back, so that is a huge deal, Yeah, you come with this incredible passion, not only relating to the music, and let's just be honest. Most of the time that I'm invited to conduct professional choirs, I'm invited to conduct the music that I truly know, as a part of my heritage. And you come with this passion and knowledge, every note has been part of you, became like your DNA. And some people go, well, I don't sing with vibrato.
Right.
Well, what do you want me to do? I don't sing with vibrato. And you can give me all kinds of stories. You can, roll on the floor passionately telling, Rachmaninoff suffered in exile and things like that. But I don't sing with vibrato.
That was actually going to be one of my questions. I would imagine, especially with the BBC singers, where is it just you get up and you ask these things of the choir and they explicitly say that's just not how we sing? Or is it just or do you feel like they're trying to make you happy, but it's not a skill set that they have? How would you describe those types of interactions?
Well, one thing is they don't try to make you happy. No, if you're a guest conductor, no. They're just, it's important for those people who sing every day. It's important for them that they use their instrument to such a degree that they can do it next week and the week after that and the week after that. And it's just sort of like nobody will say no to you, but when you consistently are not getting what you're asking for, you just you must be smart enough to stop asking or change your ask.
Right.
Right. You can't just say, well, listen, I was hired to conduct, Rachmaninoff Vespers. This is what I'm trying to do. You can't just say that, because then you're not going to like you, and then nothing good is going to come out of it.
That is fascinating.
Next time, something that would not require 18 singers in London to make the sound of 100 Russians.
Sure.
You see what I mean? Yeah. And so you would
Uh-huh.
go, is there because there's such a thing as Russian Baroque, right? Just nobody knows about it. And because it doesn't sound like Rachmaninoff or Chesnakov or Grichaninov. And that's the sound that, especially in this country, or, in Europe as well, that's what everybody is looking for, those harmonies, right? But that is the new Russian school, really, when the Romantics and post-Romantics started to write religious music.
Are you a director new to the profession? Or are you a seasoned director who is in a new place? One of my favorite tips for generating interest in the program and to instill buy-in is to plan a trip. There are so many options. You can go to Orlando, you can go to Ireland, or you can perform in a parade or a theme park. You can even take the stage at Carnegie Hall in New York. Wherever you end up, not only will your current crew look forward to the trip, but younger students will count the days until it's their turn to go. If you have no idea where to start, connect with Kaleidoscope Adventures at mykatrip.com. Yeah, that's fascinating. I had a really nice experience, or at least an enriching experience. One of my professors in graduate school was a Russian woman who was a musicologist, and we did quite a bit of the Russian liturgical stuff when I was there. And it was always, it's funny how you describe just the passion of every note and how that came out of her as well. Just like we couldn't just sing the note. There was something in every single note, which was a really neat experience. Now, I am curious too about Chanticleer, if you wouldn't mind backtracking just a little bit, because that's another ensemble that has a signature sound like that. Yes. They have the Chanticleer sound. So then they bring you in as a guest, or for a period of time, I don't know what they called it, when you were
Yeah,
their
it's a
artistic
guest
director.
music director. Yeah.
Guest music director, right? So how does that work there when you're working with them and trying to get put your stamp on something that it has such a brand already?
Right. Really you have to find that compromise somewhere in between, because a male soprano is not going to have that warmth, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But, we had such a long time to work on that program compared to, going to Seraphic Fire and you have, 5 rehearsals and then you have 5 concerts there. And plus I worked with them before quite a few times when they just had a couple of Russian pieces and I would go to coach. And it was a full Russian program, as in, folk songs, and then there were also some like soldier songs. It's a whole different layer of music in Russia. And then we had also some music that was written at the end of 20th century, which was much more chamber. Yeah, there were moments when I would just ask Cortez, Cortez, can you go louder? And he would say, no, that's it. That I cannot do. But
Right.
I do feel, well, first of all, they had Eric. And with Eric, somehow, like, everything just goes up and it gives everything just a little bit more mass. I don't know how. Well, obviously we know how with overtones. But
Yes.
Eric just kind of the bass and the bass and the baritone are so rich that it fortified the top.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that sounds like a dream. They're just such a wonderful ensemble. I'm just curious too, and just in general with this idea of working as a guest artistic director. And so I appreciate your thoughts on that. Let's move into movement. I know that this is a big passion of yours. So when you say that it's important for choirs and for singers to involve movement, do you mean choreography? I'm going to set this up for you. What do you mean when you say singer movement?
Okay, so this is kind of going back to partially, I think, to my own personality and also my training. So we, in the elementary school, if you can imagine, we had dancing. And so in first grade, you learn to dance like a little simple minuet, and then a polka, and then a polonaise, and then a mazurka, and then a waltz. And so, all of it, and so that was elementary school, but also in music, in my music school, which I was going to every day after school. So just like everything is related to body. For instance, my piano teacher, did not believe that you can play minuet without knowing how to dance a minuet. So anything that, you just do, go to Anna Magdalena piano book, right? And then she would say, well, dance it to me because I don't see a shape of your phrase. Like, where does your foot go there? Are you on the heel or are you on the toe? Then she would relate it to the way the finger goes and all of these things. And I was, as a good Russian girl, I did, of course, ballet and figure skating and music. And so there was so much movement in my early training that I learned to process everything, including emotions, even as a child, through some kind of movement. Decades before I knew about whirling dervishes, I used to, whirl like this when I was upset. And, decades before I knew about Qigong and the incredible healing power of shaking, I would shake, just like animals do anyways. And so then what happened when I actually started teaching that is when I just was off the boat, in 1995, and I didn't have enough English to talk to the choir about phrasing. And so I would sing, of course, but I would also dance to them. And I would say, look, this is the shape of the phrase. And I would do like this stupid interpretive dance practically. And so that's kind of like where everything started. And when I was teaching at San Jose State University, I was director of choral activities there for a while. The students were kind of going with it. So it was never something that we would take into performance. But I wanted them to feel like more of a theater, relate to each other and then, just do something, beyond just just something that actually is more improvisatory. Like, how would your body want to move to this? And then about 15 years ago, is it 15 years ago, maybe a little bit less, I really, really started to study yoga. And then maybe 10 years ago, I went very deep into Qigong. And I don't know how much you know about Qigong, but it's yet another energetic art. So you most probably have heard of Tai Chi.
Yes.
Yeah, so there's Tai Chi, Qigong, yoga, and Ayurveda. They're all sort of the same petals of the same flower, which is how to heal how to feel the energy, how to move the energy, and how to let the energy always flow through you to release whatever it needs to be released, or get power from the elements. It is so beautiful. It is just incredible. And so as I was learning this, and I was learning it in group classes, but I also had a teacher teach me personally, individually, I could not bring it to my students, my chorale musicians. I had to, because I discovered it's such of connecting movement to feeling, and also connecting movement and all of this appreciation and understanding of the body to vocal training. I mean, vocally, my singers improved so much. And I have noticed, well, first of all, I've started doing yoga with my students, because they would come from high school or middle school just so in their heads, they couldn't even relax. And so I would, so now every kid, when they become a member of Cantabile, they get a yoga mat. This is a part of it. So they get a music folder, a yoga mat, and a shirt. So, and then they all know that every rehearsal is going to start on the mat with the meditation, and then sometimes it's simple flow. For the little guys, we just ask them to sit, close their eyes, and wait until the little bell is no longer sounding. But that is bringing yourself to the center. It's incredible. And everywhere I go, so for instance, we don't have chairs in any of our rooms. So because there are a couple of other things that come with the movement. First of all, I like to have my students sing from different parts of the room. Mm-hmm. So they don't this is just sort of one way to hear the music. But what if we made a big circle and turned around, not singing into the circle, but turn around? Or we put one section over there and the rest of section to the other part of the room. My symphony chorus, also, we have chairs because there's older people. We have chairs, but people can move outside of the chairs and actually move around. And all the warm-ups are always moving around. And, it's taken years for some of my engineers, of Silicon Valley. They live here. Mm-hmm. And then for them sometime to go, just silliness, some kind of a silliness, just waking up the spirit, waking up the joy. To me, joy is everything.
And releasing tension too. Releasing physical tension.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so I want to try to drill in a little bit more about what this looks like in your rehearsal, especially since most people hearing this conversation will just be hearing us talk and not seeing us. A few people will see the video, but mostly will just listen. So let's kind of describe. So you've already talked about how your rehearsals oftentimes will start with a yoga mat, and they will that's part of some kind of a mental and physical preparation. Do you then later in the rehearsal do any guided, we're going to move now times? Or is it that you just build it into the culture of your rehearsal to where the singers just know to move whenever and however they feel they need to during the rehearsal? How would you describe how that looks if I were to walk in and watch you rehearse?
Yeah. Every rehearsal starts with time on the mat. Unless I am doing a Qigong sequence you don't have to be, on your knees or anything like that. And they know. And then as soon as we're done with that, we do the finalizing sort of saying. And then as they start rolling their mats, we start warming up. So there is no pause. So that's obviously it's some kind of a humming or something like that, something you can do no matter what your body is doing at the moment. And then they put their shoes on and then they come and they're very much spaced. And for the rest of the warm up, I often say, just go anywhere. Just so during all the warm ups, the students move. Sometimes I ask them to match their step to the beat. Sometimes I ask them to improvise the movement of the arms and the body. And then, I always teach them that we have the 4 stages of movement or expression. And it goes from posture, right? Then to gesture. That's a smaller one, right? And posture, it is open or close. And then the gesture, and then face, and then eyes. And so sometimes there would be a very large movement as you walk really long. You take a very long step and you match your arms to that particular movement of the body. And sometimes I would ask them to compact and then just do something with literally fingertips and maybe eyebrows, so they know how to make them smaller, minimize, and how to maximize. So so this is the warm-ups. After the warm-ups, we decide how we stand. But at any point, I might ask them is to not sing, but just gesture the phrase. So I do give them a little bit of a menu. Like, for instance, I teach them expanding and contracting. Like, how can you expand? You can expand diameter, you can chest forward, arms back, spread your legs, and all of this kind of theatrical stuff. But then they have to do it as what their body is telling them.
Right.
And that goes throughout the entire rehearsal unless we're running something through.
Yeah. So it sounds to me like you're teaching them to look like the music would sound.
Exactly.
In some ways. Yeah, which in a lot of ways, that's what great conductors do. They look like the music. And so then the players and the singers don't have to try to overly translate. So it sounds like you're trying to kind of build that into the singer's almost DNA, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. And they also ask to recite poems that we sing as it was something that they do on stage, and they had to, be in a certain space on stage and move. Like, say the first line, looking at the audience, turn your left shoulder and say the left second line. How do you take the sound out of it? Only keep the poetry and only keep the poetry and the movement. So I do a lot of that stuff, and they love it. But my dream of actually doing this as a piece of music just came true. We just premiered a 25-minute composition by Jocelyn Hagen, specifically written for movement, small instrumental ensemble, and treble choir. And it was 25 minutes of that theatrical kind of a movement. It was just glorious.
Yeah. Well, that's actually related to what I was going to ask anyway. So that's perfect. Thank you for finishing that thought, because what I was going to ask was, you mentioned earlier that you don't necessarily take this idea into performance, that it's part of your rehearsal. But does that mean that if I were to watch your choir on a video, that I would see a very stiff and standing still performing ensemble? I doubt it, right? So, because it's built into their DNA. So how would you describe the way it just, apart from Jocelyn's piece that was written in this way, but a typical piece, how would you describe the physical movement of your choir when they are performing typically?
Well, I think the best way to know how we do it is to watch our 2019 performance at the National ACDA, because we had some pieces with tiny little choreography, almost like symbolic choreography, when we did a piece about Japanese concentration camps. And then we did a piece of music by a Cuban composer, which didn't have any movement to it, but it was just coming out of the music, that all the movements there actually are something that we discovered while we were physically manifesting it in the rehearsal. And then there was another piece that I choreographed a little bit. We often do, gosh, I'm just such a sucker for good time. We often do pieces that are world music influenced, or just arrangements. And so, for instance, we just did a Yemeni piece, and it came with great choreography. So we were like really dancing. And 2 years ago, my top group, actually my entire cantabile, did a full concert of Indian music. And of course, there was dancing there. We danced practically every single piece. So if anything can be danced or physically expressed, I'll do it. But when they were singing a full concert of Baroque music last year, now we didn't dance, but I put a lot of Baroque things in there.
So always just a little bit of theater.
Yes, I love theater. I love theater. And because I've done so much of, Park and Bark symphonic chorus, when I started working with cantabile, I just thought, I always dance with little kids. Yeah. I love teaching little kids. I think this is going to be my retirement plan. I'm just going to sit on the floor and just do little bitsy spider.
I'm sure that would be a wonderful retirement. I think my retirement plan is to become a wise old bartender. You
would be perfect.
Like in movies, there's always one in movies. Like he sits behind the bar, somebody's crying, and then you walk over and talk to them, and like you make their life better. And then and then you never see the bartender again in the movie. But he's like a really important character. That's who I want to be when I'm retired.
Exactly. And as long as you say a couple of words, your name will be in the.
That's right.
In the titles, yes.
It's funny how we have our dreams. So Elena, that all sounds really, really interesting and really good. And so I'm going to take us in another final direction. Of course, I'm sure that you are aware that your homeland of Russia has been in the news a lot lately. And I'm not going to make you talk about the current stuff because I think that's such a hot button topic. However, one of the things that I have come across recently in my Facebook group are choir directors, colleagues, asking questions about whether or not they should take that Russian piece off their program that they were planning on doing. Or even I've seen, should I take that Israeli folk song off my program that I was thinking about doing? Or a Palestinian folk song, should I take that off my program because I don't want to be seen as supporting something or not? And I know that you did a program in Cincinnati with vocal arts there that was called Voices in Exile. And I thought this might be a really good way for us to broach this topic. So at least that we have like a 10,000 foot view about your thoughts and advice maybe for artists that are trying to not necessarily step on a landmine of geopolitical opinions, so to speak, but at the same time, knowing that we want our art and our programming to be inclusive and not to single out groups for we're not going to do your music anymore. Your thoughts about that, and if it's okay, maybe just kind of start by describing what this program in Cincinnati was and why you did it.
Yeah, it's a tough topic. First of all, I think that everybody should do what they feel comfortable doing. I mean, I'm happy to share my thoughts about it. It's sad if something like this comes as a decision from above and it's not really conductor's choice to do music. But again, as you said, 10,000 feet view of it. When I lost a couple of engagements at the beginning of the war simply because I had a Russian name. Oh. And because the music was a Russian program. I mean, I could have changed the program to not music. And for instance, that's what happened with Seraphic Fire. They said, just do whatever you want, but let's just stay away from the Russian. And that was also wonderful. My program for vocal arts ensemble came in many ways from my own deep dig inside of what it's like to be now a voice in exile. Right. For instance, what's happening right now is, it's over 1 million of Russians that are not okay with the war left Russia in the last 2 years. 1 million. Wow. That's people with great education. Most of them had wonderful positions, but they left because they cannot literally support and they're afraid. And some of them are political immigrants as well. And it's just incredible that it's almost exactly 100 years ago something like this already happened. There were people who left because they were afraid for their lives and for their families. And again, we're talking about very famous people: Prokofiev, Stravinsky, Rachmaninoff, Chagall, the people that when we incredible Russian culture, this is who we mention. And that is just the musicians and, Nijinsky with the ballet. I mean, so many. And then they suffered incredibly. And so many of them just would not even write anything in exile. So they're already suffering because they were pushed out of their own country. And yet now their music is being canceled. So I did not feel any of that angst, of course, because I've been here now for a long time. But it was a strange thing. I used to be interesting to people, not only because I'm a musician, musician of stature, but also because I knew something that other people did not know and with such depth. And now what was really my heart is almost, I shouldn't talk about it. So I created a program of music that was written by these composers that I just mentioned, Prokofiev, Stravinsky, Rachmaninoff, but also the ones who were living in inner exile. I think it's called not inner exile, when you're still in the country but you don't agree. Forgot the name. But people who, like Schnittke, like Shostakovich, who were at all
conscientious objectors. I think that might be conscientious objector might be the term.
Yes, maybe that's what it is. But it's the people who could not say anything because it was Stalin. Mm-hmm. You don't just and they had to actually write music. That is another question. How a genius like Shostakovich could write music that has the word Stalin in every other phrase and still write music of a genius. That was always he had to write symphonies and choral poems and songs on subjects that would never otherwise be anywhere close to him, close to his mind. So, and then, Schnittke, of course, who had to leave, and Gubaidulina, another phenomenal composer. She just died literally a month ago at the age 93. So that was I really wanted to know, what do they sound like when they write outside of the country? And then everybody is different. Rachmaninoff stopped writing for voice altogether, never wrote anything. Stravinsky started writing in Latin. And that also, not Chesnakov, but, another one who started living and was living here in this country, wrote in English. Is it still Russian music? Is it still them? But then at the same time, there is Joseph Brodsky, who also left Russia as he was pushed out of the country, and yet he received Nobel Prize of Poetry for writing in English. Just all of these paths, they're so different. But and I also had Ukrainian music, of course, there in that concert, because there's a Ukrainian composers who had to flee Ukraine because of the war. So that's also an immigration of a kind. So it was a very interesting and very soul-searching kind of a program, and it really touched people's hearts.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Now, I have my own 10,000-foot view of this topic, and I want to see what you think about it, because I agree with you what you said earlier, which is that conductors ultimately should program this music if they feel comfortable doing it. They should have to feel comfortable. But at the same time, you've taken great pains already in the last few minutes to point out that not all Russians support the policies of Russian leaders, right? But that's true of Americans too. Mm-hmm. That's not weird. And that oftentimes the artists themselves, the musicians, the playwrights, the dancers are disproportionately anti-war in general. And so I find it very strange that we as artists would effectively, I don't think people intend to, but effectively punish our fellow artists and musicians for the policies and the actions of the wealthy elite people who run their country. To me, that just seems like a weird, miss of the target, so to speak. But I see that happening a lot, where we're not going to program this music because of what somebody over there with a gun did or whatever. That just seems odd to me. Thoughts about that?
It is very odd, especially not programming. I mean, what are the chances that somebody in America is going to program a piece by a composer who is living right now and openly supporting the war? I would say zero. I would say
Yeah,
zero.
I would
If
say so
people
too.
go for Russian music, they will most probably look at, again, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, people who have nothing to do with the war, right? Composer who composed beautiful music because of their love for their country before anything even happened, and who themselves suffered because they did not agree with the regime at the time. So do we support, I don't know, do we support Putin when we perform Rachmaninoff Vespers? Or is it just, it's just the optics, right? As they like to say in Silicon Valley, the optics. Well, we're not doing Russian music. Well, support Russians who are actually suffering by singing the music that would make every Russian stand for what's right.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. It sounds like in a lot of ways we're on the same page. It just seems, and the other thing I think about too, that it, especially if we're talking about like, I guess I could kind of see it if we were talking about some big national symphony orchestra or the military band or some high profile concert put on by politicians. I could wrap my mind around why you would want to consider the country that you're programming the music. I get that. But if we're talking about like the music you choose to sing with your middle school choir in some tiny town in Kansas or something, it would be hard to convince me that that programming choice would help a Ukrainian or would help someone in Palestine or, in any kind of way that's meaningful. But instead, we add insult to injury to those artists that are probably on our side on a topic anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. There was only one thing that I saw on Facebook, some repertoire forum, and that was almost funny. There was a conductor who was asking, it was literally maybe 3-4 months ago, and he was asking whether anybody knew more Red Army songs because he was doing a concert of all Red Army chorus pieces. And that
Oh,
I
wow.
thought that maybe was a little too much. So I did
Yes.
write I said, I would, if you would like, I could recommend wonderful songs, and they would sound like what the sound that you're looking for, that robust, but they will have nothing to do with the Russian art.
Yeah. Yeah, that's incredible. Now, I imagine right now, it would be difficult, but to go back there for any purpose because of the war. But when is the last time that you were in Russia? I'm just curious.
I was in Russia in 2022
Well,
in the
that's not
summer.
too long ago then.
No, it's not too long ago. My mother is still here, is still there.
Okay. So you go. So do you go if you have music things to do, or do you sometimes just go just to see her?
I go just to see her, yes. And then
Yeah.
normally I would go every year, but I haven't been since 2022.
Sorry if this is personal, but is that because of the war? Is it just harder to travel?
Well, yeah, you know that nothing now flies to Russia. You have
Mm,
to, it's through Turkey or through Dubai. It's a very convoluted way. So it's not like in the old days. You go to Amsterdam and then take another plane, and you are in St. Petersburg in 2.5 hours. No, it's very convoluted.
yeah. Wow. It's tragic. And I don't know of any war, any time in history that there weren't victims on both sides.
Mhm.
People suffer regardless of which country they're living in that's involved in the war. That's terrible. Now, is your mom like far away from any of the fighting, or is that something that she?
Well, she's not in danger, but I don't know if you heard, but this a few weeks ago there were drones actually flying into Moscow.
Oh, wow. No, I didn't hear.
Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, Elena, this has been really, really interesting, and I appreciate you being vulnerable with us about this. That's a tough topic. Let's finish with something a little bit lighter.
Hmm.
If you have any advice, and we're going to kind of go back to the choir movement thing to wrap this up. So, if you would have some advice for a director who maybe is a Midwestern American, I'm speaking for a friend here who grew up being taught that you should never move while you're singing because it's distracting. Oh yeah, we were taught when I was younger to grab the side of my pants so that it would not tempt me to do any kind of movement at all, and we would stand still. It's a very like Midwestern Lutheran kind of a thing, and there's not a lot of, now we're outgrowing that, we're growing past that,
Yeah.
But I still see kids that getting them to move at all is extremely difficult. So how do you start if you were to encounter a singer who's uncomfortable moving when they sing? What would be your approach?
Wait a second, but isn't Midwest so big on show choirs?
That's funny. That's funny that you bring that up because yes, but it's almost a separate choral culture. You don't get very many places in the Midwest that do both or do a whole lot of both. So in a lot of ways, show choir is I liken it more to like a musical theater culture. And so the singers feel permission to do it then. But if you're going to sing I guess what you would call a traditional choral piece,
Mm.
then you should stand totally still.
Well, first of all, get out of the traditional choral pieces. I
Mm,
think, yeah, body percussion is a great way in. Because body percussion is, especially if a song comes with a body percussion, and you can't just say, well, listen, this, can we just do it without body percussion? No, we can't. It's a part of the score. So that would be my first suggestion. The second is start young.
yes.
Start young. Go to the elementary school. I think that morph is such a fabulous thing to do. But you know what? You can also take the simple Kodai hand signs, and you can just kind of go instead of you can make them into kind of a movement. You first can dance with them. I mean, I think silliness is also wonderful. I've heard it somewhere. Somebody said permission to be silly. Like everybody is given a permission to be silly, right? I mean, you have to be careful with that. But I have conducted so many honor choirs, and then whenever I do an honor choir, I ask for no chairs. So even if it's 200 of them, there's still no chairs. If they need to sit down, they sit down on the floor. I mean, they're young. And if
Yeah.
I think that once they kind of have to buy in. This kids who come to honor choirs, they don't know each other for the most part, right? And then maybe 99% of them then never did what I am suggesting, you
Yeah.
see? But when everybody's doing it, then they do it.
Peer pressure.
Yeah, exactly. Peer pressure. Sometimes I have boys who are just kind of very reticent, and I give them a menu. Like, you can do one of these 4 gestures, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
don't improvise. You have to be insistent. You have to, I also think that little yoga that you can find, on any TikTok ever, just do a little yoga with them, just something funny, like, stand upside down or something like that. Start
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. That's a great suggestion. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing your expertise and spending about an hour with me. I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Chris. It's been lovely. Thank you for letting me talk about things that I adore. I'm very
Well, I'm so
passionate.
glad. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of a conversation. If you are still hearing my voice, that means you're one of the MVPs, one of the diehards, one of the real ones, as the kids say. So if you are willing on the way out to check out a few different ways that you can help me continue to make this show high quality. 1, use the promo code. That's the biggest one at Sight Reading Factory, at mymusicfolders.com, at mychoirropes.com, at graphitepublishing.com, and endeavormusicpublishing.com. All of those take the Choralosophy checkout code. And of course, now the newest one is 3-Minute Theory. You can get a 15% discount when you enter Choralosophy at checkout there. And of course, going to Apple Podcasts and leaving a positive review is very helpful there, and sharing the episodes to your colleagues in real life and on social media. All of those things are incredibly helpful and allow me to continue to create this resource for you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.